The story begins in New York. We are introduced to a man named Dan who works at a car showroom selling used cars. Dan is an excellent salesman. No customer ever leaves without buying a car from him. His skills are so strong that he always convinces people to buy. And because of this, everyone at the showroom admires him. One day, the shop manager tells Dan that they want to take his photo for a celebration because everyone is praising his performance. Dan politely refuses and says that it is his wedding anniversary, so he wants to go home and spend time with his family. Saying this, he leaves the showroom. At home, we meet his wife, Jessica. Dan has 3 children. The eldest is Kyle, then Nina, and the youngest is Max. At the moment, Jessica and Nina are arguing. Nina originally wanted to go to one college, but now she wants to attend a different one just to be with her boyfriend. Jessica strongly disapproves of this. Dan tries to talk to Nina, but she refuses to listen to him as well. Dan plans to take Jessica out for the evening. He tells Kyle that he needs to take care of Max because he and Jessica are going out. Kyle says he cannot because he has to go out for group study. He claims that all his friends sit together to study, so he cannot watch Max. Dan then gives the responsibility to Nina, but she gets irritated and angry. Eventually, everyone leaves the house. Soon, we see Kyle's friends, and it becomes clear what this so-called group study really is. They are actually playing online games together. Kyle is a serious online gamer. He is well known in the gaming world, and gamers across the internet recognize his name. On the other side, Dan and Jessica are at an amusement park. Jessica tells Dan that she does not feel good being away from the kids. She complains that Dan is always busy with work, and reminds him that she has been asking for a family vacation for a long time. Dan stays silent. They continue walking around the amusement park for a while, and then Jessica says that she actually liked his plan and feels happy that they came out together. They start kissing. Suddenly, a group of boys start recording a video of them and mocking them. When Dan tries to explain and calm them down, the boys threaten to upload the video online. Dan asks them again to delete it, but they refuse. Instead, one of the boys throws his drink on Dan's head. Jessica steps in and separates them. Dan chooses not to fight and goes back home. Later, Jessica goes for her boxing practice because she is extremely frustrated with everything happening at home. She releases all her anger on the punching bag. By mistake, she hits another girl who was training nearby. The girl's name is Gwen. Jessica immediately apologizes, but Gwen does not get angry. She calmly says that accidents happen. They sit down and start talking. Jessica opens up about her life. She says her husband always stays at home and wants the family to do the same, but she wants them to go out and travel together. She says she is tired of explaining this to Dan, and her children also do not listen to her. The house feels full of problems, which is why she takes out her frustration during boxing. Gwen reassures her that everything will be fine. Before leaving, Gwen tells Jessica that she is a travel agent, and hands her a card saying she can contact her anytime if they want to travel. Meanwhile, we see Dan at a supermarket. While shopping, a man suddenly attacks him. Dan starts fighting back, and it becomes clear that he is not an ordinary man. Dan has a dark and dangerous past. He used to be a government assassin. After retiring, he disappeared and started living a quiet life without telling anyone. Even so, he has not forgotten how to fight. He easily defeats the attacker and leaves the supermarket. When Dan reaches home, he realizes that his enemies now know where he lives. He understands that he cannot stay there anymore unless he deals with them first. He pulls out a hidden stash of weapons and a large amount of cash from under the stairs. He knows he cannot waste any time. First, he goes to find Nina at her college. There, he learns that Nina left the magazine community 9 months ago. He later finds her sitting under a bridge with her friends enjoying herself. Dan gets furious. He confronts her and asks what she is doing and why she never told him. He says he is deeply disappointed. Nina replies that she is disappointed in him too. She tells him that he never even read her articles and never valued her work, which is why she left the magazine community. Then Dan takes Nina with him to meet Kyle at Samir's house. When he arrives, he realizes that Kyle has also been lying to him. Kyle had claimed he went there for group study or chess classes, but in reality, he was just playing games. Dan is disappointed in him as well. He gathers all the kids into the car and drives straight to Jessica. Jessica works at a hospital. Dan goes there and tells her that she always complained of never going on vacations, so now they're going on one. and not just anywhere, but to Las Vegas. Without giving anyone time to react, he takes the whole family and leaves. As they drive, Dan notices a black car following them. He increases his speed, confused about how they tracked him. He quickly drives to his showroom. When he lifts the car, he finds a tracking device hidden inside it. He removes it and secretly plants it on a customer's car. Then he tells the customer to drive as fast as possible to test the car. The customer does exactly that, and the men chasing Dan follow the wrong car. After some time, Dan safely drives away with his family. Dan notices that everyone is taking photos to post on social media. He grabs all their phones and throws them away, saying no one will use phones during this trip. He explains that if they post anything online, his enemies will easily track them. Later, he stops at a nearby shop and asks for a map. The shopkeeper hands it to him, but when Dan pays in cash, the shopkeeper gets suspicious and insists he should use a credit card. Dan refuses, pays extra cash, and leaves. Back in the car, everyone sits quietly. They are not used to being without their phones. Slowly, they start talking to each other and even singing songs. They begin enjoying the moment together, realizing this is a time they always missed because they were glued to their screens. Meanwhile, Dan's house is shown again. A man named McFerry arrives with his men. They search the entire house but find no trace of Dan. They try tracking his credit cards, but there is no activity. His children's social media accounts are also inactive. McFerry angrily says he wants Dan and his entire family as soon as possible. Dan checks into a hotel. As Kyle steps outside, one of his fans recognizes him from his live gaming streams. She takes a selfie with him and uploads it online. The moment Dan sees this, he realizes trouble is coming. He immediately gathers everyone to leave. Soon, 3 men on motorcycles start following them. Dan notices that everyone in the car is wearing headphones. He turns the music volume up high. One by one, he takes out the attackers. He shoots the first man, rams the second with his car, and the third crashes into a billboard, causing a massive explosion. The blast wakes Jessica, but Dan lies and calmly puts her back to sleep. He keeps driving all night. When morning comes, Dan stops the car and falls asleep. Nina wakes up and sees they have reached the countryside. She says she wants to visit a nearby university. Dan takes them there. As they walk around the campus, Nina talks to Kyle about her boyfriend. Kyle listens carefully and gives her advice. Nina feels happy. At first, she feels understood by her brother, and they share a deep conversation. Elsewhere, Jessica talks to Dan and reveals that she used to be an athlete. After marrying Dan, she got busy with family life and gave up her career. Dan decides that it is time to tell her about his past, but before he can speak, he notices a man carrying a briefcase and becomes suspicious. Dan approaches him and talks for a while, then realizes the man is just a businessman. He explains that he came from Germany to search for his daughter. This shocks Jessica, and she walks away. When Dan opens the man's briefcase, he finds it filled with seeds, confirming the man was harmless. Suddenly, one of McFerry's men attacks Dan. Dan fights him for a long time and eventually kills him, then walks away. Later, Nina goes to her boyfriend's room. When he opens the door, she sees another girl inside with him. They were being intimate. Nina is heartbroken. She breaks up with him and runs back to the car crying. After some time, Dan talks to her. She tells him everything. Dan reminds her that he taught her how to teach people a lesson. He tells her to go back and do exactly that. Nina returns and beats up her boyfriend. Afterwards, she feels relieved and strong. She is happy now and starts respecting Dan more. Dan tells her that once they return from the vacation, she will rejoin her magazine community. Nina agrees and thanks him for not telling Jessica anything. Finally, they reach Las Vegas. Dan calls an old associate named OG and asks him to create fake passports for the family so they cannot be traced. While Dan sits in a cafe waiting for OG, Kyle joins him. They talk and then asks why Kyle chose gaming as a career. Kyle says he doesn't like the real world because people are fake. He feels better in the online world where he is stronger and more confident. He explains that gaming is not easy and requires sharp thinking and skill. He challenges Dan, saying that if Dan doesn't believe him, they can play a laser shooting game together. If Dan wins, Kyle will do whatever Dan says, but if Kyle wins, he will become a gamer for real. After hearing this, Dan agrees. The two of them go to play the game, but Dan defeats Kyle very easily. This is because Dan was once a professional killer. Kyle feels disappointed, but Dan hugs him and tells him that it's okay. They check into a hotel in Las Vegas where Dan meets OG. He collects the fake passports and also takes some weapons. At night, Dan plans to take Jessica out for dinner. Before leaving, he clearly tells Kyle and Nina that no matter what happens, they must stay inside the room and never open the door for anyone. After saying this, Dan and Jessica leave. However, Kyle and Nina sneak out and go to the hotel's gaming area. Meanwhile, Dan and Jessica are heading to dinner, when one of McFerry's men spots them and immediately informs McFerry. In the gaming area, Kyle meets a professional gamer named Ren. Ren introduces Kyle to his entire team. On the other side, Dan finally decides to tell Jessica the truth about his past. When he tells her everything, she is completely shocked and finds it hard to believe. At the same time, Ren asks Kyle to take his place in a game. Kyle starts playing and accepts the challenge. Ren does this so he can flirt with Nina. Later, Dan and Jessica return to the hotel and walk toward their children's room. Before they can reach it, McFerry's men attack them. Dan easily kills 2 of them. The third man, named Coogan, points a gun at Jessica. Seeing this, Dan pretends to calm down. Quietly, he grabs a knife and stabs it straight into Coogan's eye, killing him instantly. Jessica is horrified by what she sees, but now she fully believes that Dan was telling the truth. Suddenly, they realize that the kids are not in the room. Dan and Jessica rush to the gaming area to find them. There, they see that Kyle has won the game and proven to everyone that he is a truly talented gamer. Dan and Jessica quickly pull both kids away and try to leave. Dan then tells Kyle and Nina the truth. He explains that he used to be a secret killer, but later left that life to live as a normal man. Now, those people are hunting him and want to kill him. Hearing this, Kyle and Nina laugh, thinking it as a joke. At that moment, gunfire erupts again. Dan hides his family behind tables and goes to fight. He shoots one enemy after another, but realizes they are wearing bulletproof vests. He changes his strategy, distracts them, and manages to escape with his family. Once they return to the room, Dan decides to tell the full truth. He reveals that his real name is Sam. He explains that he served in the military, where he met McFerry. McFerry formed a secret group that killed people the government and law could not touch. Dan carried out these killings. Later, he discovered that McFerry was taking huge amounts of money for these jobs and was using Dan as a tool. That is why Dan left the group, created a new identity, and started a normal life. After hearing this, Kyle and Nina feel devastated. They say Dan has ruined their lives. Jessica is also furious. She says they have been married 18 years and he is telling her the truth only now? She accuses him of putting their entire family in danger. Upset, she goes to her room and calls Gwen, asking her to plan a trip. Gwen agrees. Soon, the family reaches the location Gwen told them about. There, they are shocked to see that Gwen has arranged a private jet. They board the plane, and during the flight, Gwen shares her story. She talks about her ex-boyfriend who left her 18 years ago and married someone else. As Jessica listens carefully, she slowly realizes that Gwen is talking about Dan. At that moment, McFerry appears and everything becomes clear. Gwen had made a deal with McFerry. She would hand over Dan's entire family to him, and in return, McFerry would give Dan to Gwen. Gwen still believes that Dan can be hers. After this, McFerry calls Dan and gives him the location of a casino. He threatens that if Dan does not arrive immediately, he will kill his entire family. Dan wastes no time and rushes to the casino. When he enters, he sees his family tied up as hostages. McFerry starts talking and tells Dan to explain their relationship. McFerry reveals that Dan is actually his son. He says he is deeply disappointed in him. Dan was a highly skilled killer, but he chose to abandon that life and live like an ordinary man, which McFerry cannot accept. He asks Dan to return to his old position, but Dan refuses. Angered, McFerry signals Gwen to kill Dan's family. To save them, Dan agrees. He asks McFerry to release his family safely, promising to do whatever McFerry wants. McFerry agrees and orders his men to take the family away in an elevator. But Jessica is not ready to leave her husband behind. Using Max's diaper, she manages to knock down one of the guards. Upstairs, Dan is handed over to Gwen. She moves closer to him, but Dan quickly knocks her unconscious. At the same time, Jessica arrives to help him. Downstairs, McFerry realizes something is wrong. Dan asks Kyle to use a drone outside to locate everyone. Kyle does exactly that. Dan starts setting traps and planting bombs all over the place. As McFerry's men move in, explosions go off. Many of them are killed, and Dan personally takes out the rest, guided by Kyle, who keeps telling him where each enemy is. Gwen regains consciousness, and McFerry orders her to go to the rooftop where Dan's family is hiding. Dan confronts McFerry again and tells him to stop everything while there is still time. McFerry refuses and orders his men to kill Dan. Bullets fly everywhere, but Dan survives. Kyle can no longer help because the drone has been destroyed. Jessica hides the kids under a table. On the rooftop, Gwen confronts Jessica. A brutal fight begins between the two women. Jessica tries everything, but Gwen overpowers her. Gwen starts laughing, believing she has won. In a final moment, Jessica stabs Gwen with a bamboo stick, piercing her chest and killing her on the spot. Back downstairs, McFerry points his gun at Dan. Before he can shoot, Nina steps in and calls McFerry her grandfather. This distracts him for a moment. Dan takes advantage and knocks McFerry down. The police arrive and arrest McFerry, sending him to prison. In the end, Nina rejoins the magazine community and becomes a reporter. Dan opens a security company that provides protection to banks. Jessica becomes a coach, returning to the athletic life she always loved. Whenever the family gets time, they go on road trips together. There is only one rule: no one is allowed to use a phone. The family is finally happy. And with that, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe.